Maybe
So
you'll
then,
see me on there.
yeah, next group's coming in, and Defion and Don's in studio. Troy is going to be on remotely, and then he also brought in Mike, previous guest who's going to be coming in. So I'm going to ask, well, I'm going to do the goofy transition thing. You guys can kind of clear the space, so to speak. And
All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
yeah,
See ya.
let me pull the graphic down and get ready for the next one. So yeah, the next thing we're doing is
Drop my phone.
Mike. You want to do the couch or you want to do the chair? You can do the blue chair. Mike's going to take over the chair. See, man, I see in you. You can throw Squirtle, the Pokemon, out of the chair, throw it out of the way if you don't need to hold on to that. So yeah, Don is, for those of you that have been watching since the beginning or been watching our stuff, Don was here earlier. And he's back, and now he's going to kind of do his show. As if you don't know, this is going to be Don's and Troy's, the Defiant Labs 100th episode, and we're glad we got Troy. He was there, but he's on. He's up there. He's there. I didn't bring him on the screen yet, but again, we're kind of making this up as we go. So you want me to just to
let me do an intro.
And let me send it over to you.
Send it to me, and then I'll send it to Troy.
Okay. There you go.
What's going on, guys? This is Don from Defion Labs, hardest working nobody in Bitcoin. This is the 100th episode of the Defion Labs podcast. We started this podcast 3 years ago, me and Troy, from my basement in his apartment. Quality was low, but the enthusiasm was high. And here we are 3 years later, filming out of Emerge Studios, and this is officially the 100th filming of our Defion Labs podcast. For those of you that are tuning in for the first time that have never seen our content, we're a Bitcoin and crypto focused podcast, and like Rich said, we do talk financial literacy as well. We have many broad scope conversations in regards to finance and how it affects all aspects of life. Everything kind of comes back to the money. My personal thesis with Bitcoin is change the money, change the world. We talk a lot about that on a weekly basis. We do have my lifelong friend in studio today as well, Mike. He was on a podcast about a month ago. He's back by popular demand as that podcast performed well. So we thought for our 100th episode, we bring Mike in because we're going to do a lot of freestyling today, reminiscing with how things have went with me and Troy the last 3 years. Troy is streaming in today. In about 20 seconds, I'm going to throw it to Troy to do a little bit of chart analysis because he's way better with that than I am, to kind of give you an update on where things are going with the market and where he thinks things are going with the market. So with that, I'm going to throw it out to Troy, live from an undisclosed location in the mountains. No, I'm just kidding. But he's gonna do some chart analysis for us while I get set up with some other things. Go ahead, Troy.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I want to congratulate Don for the consistency. 100th episode. That's a huge milestone. We'll go through some videos. Am I echoing? I hear myself echoing a little bit.
No, we hear you good. No echo.
Oh, I hear myself echoing. So basically, yeah, I mean, we'll go over some price action. I know Don's ideology is a little bit different than mine when it comes to, position investing or trading. I wouldn't consider myself more of a trader. I'm more of a position investor. So what I like to do every single day is just go over the total crypto market cap, because this is taking all the cryptocurrencies market cap and just putting them into one index. And this is kind of like the benchmark I use. And I run some systems on it to get an idea on where the trend is. Like, what's the direction of the trend? Is it up? Is it down? Because ultimately, finance is a game of probabilities. So when I'm building these systems, I want to know, what is the probability that this could either continue to dump, reverse? Is this a time to scale out? So this is kind of my ideology is for someone that's a position investor. But the total crypto market cap, 3.9 trillion. I know we tapped 4 trillion, Don. And we just kind of just hit that resistance right there. But I know that's an all-time high for total, which is huge. But as you can see, the total crypto market cap on my MTPI score is max bullish. So, but the weird thing about it, and one thing I want to bring up is when you look at the Bitcoin chart in comparison to the total crypto market cap, it looks pretty weak. I know there's different phases of the cycle where Bitcoin typically leads. Bitcoin dominance is high, but as far as my system on Bitcoin, and again, I'm not looking at like the 5 minute or the 15 minute or the 20 minute chart. I zoom out. I don't look at anything less than the 2 day, and some of my indicators have flipped bearish. So this doesn't mean that Bitcoin's going to 60K or 30K. This is just a kind of like a pause. Momentum has kind of slowed down at this specific time. I wouldn't, take on any extra risk. If you're doing a strategic dollar cost averaging, that's completely fine. But yeah, Bitcoin's at 115,000. As you can see, some of my indicators did flip bearish, but we did tap, 124,000. I don't think that's a top. I don't really want to do like price targets because I strictly just trade off data. But yeah, Bitcoin's holding pretty relatively strong. I mean, it's not as strong as obviously Ethereum, which I'm going to get into next, is the ETH Bitcoin chart. Now, this chart basically shows you the relative strength between Bitcoin versus Ethereum. So what I like to do with this ratio is just identify, okay, like what's the strength? As you can see, Ethereum has had a lot more strength compared to Bitcoin. So this is a tool to use, like, okay, like if my goal was to compound maximum gains, like get the maximum value in that time period, like this is the ratio that I was anticipating. We talked about 2 weeks ago in the last podcast where I was anticipating this flip, and now we're at zero. We're at like 0.04 right now, basically, with the ETH versus Bitcoin chart, and that's 1.0 max bullish. So this is something to keep in mind, because if this starts to reverse, then you'll be like, okay, then now maybe money's going to flow back into Bitcoin, and I want to be positioned in that dominant core asset. So this is another ratio we like to look at. I mean, that's really we did the total, we did the Bitcoin, and we did the ETH Bitcoin ratio. Another one I like to look at is just the ETH chart, and ETH is trading at 47.57. Obviously, if you've been following crypto, you know that ETH had I think it was 15% yesterday. It just had been violently going up ever since about April 3rd, when we bottomed at like 1437. I believe that was like some war fear. But yeah, as you can see, all my indicators are max long on Ethereum right now. So basically, my strategy and some things to look out on are like their different ratios, because one of the things I made a mistake on early on was looking at the assets I'm holding and using them as the dollar denominator. So when you're looking at AVAX USD or ETH USD, you're looking at the price in US dollars. But if you're comparing that asset and you want to invest optimally, you want to use Bitcoin or Ethereum, whatever of those dominant majors, whether if Bitcoin's outperforming ETH, like we looked at that Bitcoin ETH chart, if Bitcoin's up, that would be the asset you'd use to denominate your shit coin, you'd like to say. And from the systems we ran, Chainlink is the only optimal. Like, we're not giving any not financial advice on like anything to buy, but if you are to speculate on something that's considered in the top 20 crypto market cap, Chainlink is outperforming Ethereum. So the barbell I'm personally using is 80% ETH and 20% Chainlink. And I also have, obviously my Bitcoin stack that I'm holding for cold storage. My ideology, my thought process on that portfolio is completely different. Like, that's like my version of a 401k. And then you have the trading account. So that's really just a little bit of things that I like to look at every single day to see what's the dominant asset. Is ETH outperforming Bitcoin? Is Solana outperforming ETH? ETH outperforming like Solana? So you always want to be comparing different assets to each other to see the relative strength. And then one last chart I want to look at is just the Bitcoin dominance chart. And this is another ratio I was anticipating for a huge sell-off, because when Bitcoin dominance decreases, typically that capital is flowing into the altcoin market. And as you can see, we're at 59 or 58%. This was the previous cycle in 2021, and then August or 2017. This was the altcoin season. So we are considered an altcoin season. There's no such thing. There's no certain definition of altcoin season. It's altcoin season is when Bitcoin dominance is selling off like it is now. The ETH Bitcoin ratio flips, which we currently have going on, and sentiment and on Twitter and Google Trends, like all coins trends on Google Trends hit an all-time high. So there's different things that we're keeping an eye out for a top signal. But again, we're not trading price targets. We're just following our system, and whatever the system shows, that's the decision I'll make. I won't make a decision anymore based off emotions. Like, for example, someone could be holding ETH and Solana and they think they're diversified, but if ETH is outperforming Solana, does it make sense to hold Solana if it's a lagging asset? If you want to compound strength and have compounding gains, you want to hold the dominant asset, which would be Ethereum at this point in time, which could change. I'm always anticipating a flip in a ratio where maybe Solana is outperforming Ethereum for a certain amount of time, where I can capture that rotation without taking any leverage, without taking on crazy risk, but just knowing when, because a lot of this is timing too. So, if, like, for example, AVAX is up 5% against ETH today, that doesn't mean I'm going to rotate into AVAX because it's just, I'm not a day trader. Maybe if, over the course of weeks, we start to see relative strength in AVAX versus ETH, then I would start considering maybe a rotation into that. But other than that,
Troy,
that's really what I like to look at.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Being that this is the 100th episode and we go all the way back to the first one, what has changed for you from day one where, I was the Bitcoin maxi and you were more of an ETH maxi? Where have you evolved in the 3 years that we first started this podcast until today? Where would you say you're at now? In just basic ideology, no chart stuff, just like your ideology on day one to episode 100.
I think I'm even more of an ETH bull.
You were kidding, right?
No, it's I wouldn't say I'm emotionally attached to Ethereum, but it is nice to see, like, my thesis for that ratio flip, or for ETH, the flippening, we had that bet. I had maybe the right idea, but my timing was off. And I know that I'm not a maxi to anything. I'm not a Bitcoin maxi. I'm not an Ethereum maxi. I'm a profit maxi. And if that means I have to sell my Ethereum to go into Bitcoin or Solana because I know that is the dominant asset to hold and it has the most strength, I will do that. So even if I have to make one more trade the rest of this cycle, and that's rotating my ETH back into Bitcoin when that ratio flips, and then just hold Bitcoin throughout the bear market and then raise cash to buy, like, obviously good valuations. But I mean, my ideology flipping with as far as Bitcoin, like, I think it's been the same. Like, I've always was looking to just keep building that as a 401k, because I don't have a 401k. I don't work in the corporate world. I don't get to max that stuff out. So I use my Bitcoin as just like kind of my 401k. So when the bear market does come, I'm still invested. I'm still exposed to the space. I didn't sell everything. I sold, maybe my shit coins and made money on that. But the ultimate goal has been the same. Just keep stacking Bitcoin. I know it's fun now. I'm celebrating a little bit. Like, ETH is outperforming Bitcoin. Woohoo. But, like, at the end of the day, the fundamentals haven't changed. So I'm still having that same plan.
Yeah, it's tough because we're in a part of the cycle now where things really get fun. So it's easy to be, like, manipulated by those feelings. I think for a majority of this bull run, Bitcoin outperformed everything and was doing what we know Bitcoin can do. And now that Ethereum is performing, and it looks like we're setting up for what usually happens, which is the parabolic bull run, the top that happens sometime probably beginning to mid fall, and then we go into that bear market, and then rinse and repeat. We're right back to Bitcoin outperforming everything, being the best pristine asset, and everything else just bleeding against Bitcoin. So I'm a little surprised, I think, to hear you say that like nothing has changed, because everything priced against Bitcoin continues to go down in price, but you can't say that about any of the other assets, including Ethereum.
Nothing has changed because I learned the hard way. Especially buying a lot of altcoins in 2022. We had they did multiples. It's like I don't think it's really worth it, man. I just think just playing more simple and less is more is the way to go, because like everyone I know, like the alpha is on when you zoom out. Like if you're looking on the 2-day or the 4-day chart, you're getting alpha. You're able to see patterns people on the 5-minute and 15-minute aren't able to change or aren't able to see. So that's another point to add on that is just zoom out, I know the bigger picture for Bitcoin, so I'm not going to just gamble my Bitcoin into, because I was tempted, honestly. Like I seen that ETH is outperforming Bitcoin, and systematically that's the right choice to make. But at the same time, I know my long-term goal with my Bitcoin. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Rich stepped out for a second. When he comes back in, I want to share the screen a little bit and then talk to Mike.
Because I don't want to confuse people when I do the charting in the beginning. Was I sharing my screen when
I
did
couldn't
this?
see it. I don't know if it was
Okay.
if it was streaming out on YouTube or not, but I couldn't see it. He was playing with the screen, so I can't tell
Okay.
if it was happening or not. But yeah, while we get Rich back in here for a minute, what do you, to you, what has this whole process been of podcasting? Like from when we birthed the idea in the backyard that I think you're sitting in right now, when we first talked about that in 2021, I think it was, or it might have been 2020 or 2021. I don't remember exactly. One of those 2 years. What have you gotten out of this whole podcasting process? How have you grown, or what have you learned?
I've definitely learned a lot as in terms of myself, as in how I speak and my thought process. Obviously we record these podcasts. It's 100th episode. I haven't been on every single one, but you're constantly refining yourself and working on your skills. And I consider this a skill, but I mean, I'm not even talking about crypto. Like I think as kind of like a person, I've kind of grown from it and realizing that there's a bias that the Dunning-Kruger effect, that you think what you don't, like more than you think and that's one of the things I've learned is throughout this process, is because we've been shooting since Bitcoin was at 15K. You've been in the cycle for a long time now, so you're constantly growing and making mistakes and realizing I'm sure way more than you knew when you're shooting in the basement, so that's kind of it. The Dunning-Kruger effect bias is one thing I struggled with, but I think I'm getting a little bit better at that.
Rich,
so.
can you share my screen? Yep. Take a look at this, man. That's the episode. This is the beginning, dude. This is the first. This is right. It says episode 2, but we did one that we didn't tape, that we had to scrap, if you remember. Like we filmed our first episode. I think it was and it never saved, because we were doing Zoom.
Yeah, we
And
might
then
have to.
If you do it, and then we also to for full transparency, we were originally the Italian Crypto Degens podcast.
Yes.
So our original name was the Italian Crypto Degens podcast, and then we rebranded 6 or 7 episodes in. We decided that we didn't want to be associated with degenerates, so we thought that it would be better to be Defion Labs. So yeah, this was the beginning. This was us. You kind of go into this a little bit more, and this is how we started, man. This is our first you can't see us. You got us in the corner really small and not the greatest quality and content. And, this is kind of where we grew to. And, for people that, this is your first introduction, if you're watching this on playback to us, we've had a couple, decent guests on for interviews. If you want to share the screen here, Rich, we had an opportunity to interview Rashad Evans like 2 years ago, UFC Hall of Famer who's also into NFTs and he's into some crypto, and we interviewed him. And then we also, when we became a part of the Emerge family at the old building, we were able to interview a poker Hall of Famer. We got a chance to interview Brian Rast, who was inducted into the Poker Hall of Fame in 2024, big Bitcoiner. And we had a really good conversation interviewing him and talking about his views and stuff like that. And, you know, we've had an opportunity to do some cool stuff on this podcast that we would have never had an opportunity to do if we weren't podcasting.
Yeah, no, for sure. That was definitely a fun experience. I didn't know, the NFT market. It's funny you bring that up because I know Rashad built their NFTs. Do you think, real quickly, like, do you think there'll be an NFT comeback, or was that just hype in 2021, or do you think it could change later? Because I know Sandbox, like a lot of the gaming and Sandbox and Decentraland, a lot of those pumps at the tail end, like you talked about that this bull market, like it's not like everything's going to go up at once. It's going to be a rotational bull market where you have to rotate into the narrative or the whatever's trending at that time. If you're holding 20 different coins, they're all going to be pumping at different times depending on what sector you're in, whether it's AI gaming,
That's more
cloud
of a
computing.
the NFTs are more of a retail.
Yeah,
That's more retail
signal.
driven.
Yeah,
That's not what this bull run has really been. This has been an institutional bull run. Even
yeah,
with this ETH move, if we're being honest and being fair, was Tom Lee doing
yeah.
a press run for ETH. Tom Lee single-handedly brought ETH back from the dead, in my opinion. That's why I think it's way too early to get super excited about ETH performance and what ETH's going to do yet, because ETH or Tom Lee's company is basically the reason why ETH did a 2x or went up 100% and ended up being a valuable asset and the second biggest asset and kind of getting everybody excited again and thinking all season was going to happen. It was really Tom Lee doing a one-man show. So when that kind of dies down a little bit and we're kind of past the Saller effect of what he's trying to do, then we'll really get an opportunity to see what's going to happen with this cycle, because we're going to need retail. And my guest that I got in studio here, my best friend Mike, if we can kind of like go into that, because Mike is retail. Mike would be the type of individual that isn't in crypto every single day, that isn't in Bitcoin every single day. Not him necessarily, but someone like him would be who would have to come in and pump that NFT market. So I'll shoot it really quick to Mike because I already know what he's probably going to say. But when we say NFTs, do you even know what the hell that is?
No.
See, yeah. So you can take that two ways. You can take that like it's still early, or do really people care about JPEGs on a computer screen? You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if the NFT market is going to come back or not. I mean, Mike, when we're having this conversation and you're watching me and Troy talk for 20 minutes about Bitcoin and crypto, like as an outsider that doesn't podcast, as somebody that owns some crypto but doesn't, I don't think you look at it every day. You probably don't even look at it for maybe a couple of weeks.
Honestly, I do check every day.
Okay, well then maybe it'll be a better answer than I would expect. When you look at our market, when you look at Bitcoin and crypto, what are some of the things that you think are good about it? What are some of the things you think are bad about it as that outsider? That's where we'll start.
Well, I honestly don't think the average person on the street still knows much about it at all.
Fair.
Because
I would agree.
Because even when I was promoting coming on this podcast, people are like, "What? Didn't Bitcoin peak like years ago? What year was that?
So early.
Like around COVID or whatever."
Yeah.
They're like, people are still talking about Bitcoin. And so the average person on the street, I still don't think knows anything about any of this world. That's my opinion.
I would agree, and the numbers kind of back that up. It's something like 95% of the population still don't own Bitcoin. So that's a good point. What else?
I pretty much only own it for FOMO. I buy a little bit every week just because I hear you talking about it, and I don't want to be left out of completely. So that's probably the only reason I buy it, honestly. And I've been buying it since 2020, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, you got a nice little,
A
not to
little
dox
bit
your
here and
portfolio, but you got a pretty, for a guy that's not.
and I don't even know anything about it. And
Yeah.
I just put $10 a week in or whatever. Kind of like a 401k. I look at it.
And that's kind of like what this in Troy, that's kind of like why we started this podcast, was to do that, right? To for my end, orange pill people, to start getting, exposure to Bitcoin and to buy a little bit and kind of figure things out. And I've said it before, like he started buying in 2020. For me, I started in 2013, and it took until almost 2020 for me to really even understand what I owned. You know what I'm saying? So it's a process of learning that's going to take a while, especially when you're like trying to change over 100-year-old system. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913. The modern monetary system that we use is like 112 years old. To change that is going to take time. So it's going to take time to learn the new system. So while you're learning it and you're getting your feet wet and you're kind of learning about what this is and how it can be something different and what value it has and the value transfer properties and, the difference between self-custody and holding it on exchange and, learning about the current system and fractional reserve banking and learning about, how the Fed prints money and why inflation exists and what's behind inflation, why when you go to the grocery store prices go up, all these things we talk about on the podcast. I think it's good, like somebody like Mike taking the approach of just like buying and still not completely understanding, but recognizing that it's probably big enough. And he said FOMO, and it's a good word to use because that's kind of what we use in this market, but kind of understanding, I don't want to be on the outside. I don't really understand completely yet, but I also don't want to be watching on the sidelines if this thing does blow up.
That's kind of my thought process too, because when I first got into Bitcoin, I had no idea what it was. I had no idea what Ethereum was. And I had FOMO. So it's more just like, I don't want to be left out. I know something's here. I feel it in my intuition, something's here. So I just kind of just dollar cost averaged in. And then once you start making a little bit of money, because if you're DCAing for 2 or 3 years, eventually you're going to be in profit holder. Then it gets exciting, and then you start diving down the rabbit hole. But yeah, I thought it was a scam when I first came across. And
yeah, most people do.
It turns out that I learned that the fiat currency is a scam. So
yeah, we've covered that plenty on this podcast, talking about how money is created and. When you go to the bank to get a loan, that the money didn't exist before you got the loan. And, we covered during this podcast in early 2024 when, those 4 banks collapsed, Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank. And, the FDIC came in and saved those depositors. And in the case of Silicon Valley Bank, 87% of depositors had over the $250,000 FDIC insurance. And the Fed, to save face, said, we're just going to cover everything. So, it is, you're right. That's the big thesis of Bitcoin. Everybody thinks Bitcoin is the scam, and they don't realize that it's the USD debt-based Ponzi scheme that is the scam. The scam is inflation every single year, prices of going up of goods and services and our wages not keeping up with that and always feeling like you're playing from behind. Like that's the scam. That's what needs to be fixed. That's what's broken. 37 trillion plus. I think we're even close to 37 and a half at this point, trillion plus in debt with no end in sight. Like that's the scam. The fact that we keep kicking the can down the road, our parents' generation threw us that debt and we're going to continue to accumulate that debt and throw it to our kids' generation. It's going to keep going and going and going. And the only way to have any sort of chance, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many other smart financial people, is to own some Bitcoin because it's the only asset that we have that's scarce, pristine, immutable, and can be actually owned in self-custody without being confiscated by a third party because there is no single point of failure.
Yeah, especially when you're in cold storage. Like when I first, again, your learning curve, when I first got, your Treasure, your Ledger, it takes a great deal of responsibility to own your own private keys. So that could definitely intimidate a lot of new people coming into the space.
Yeah,
so
you bring up a good point with the cold because when I don't know if you watched the podcast that Mike was on, we talked about that, and that's a place that I've changed since the beginning of this podcast. I was super pro self-custody. I was like, don't use exchanges. Exchanges are garbage. Never put Bitcoin on exchanges. And then Mike comes on, and Mike's like, I have my Bitcoin on an exchange, and even before that, having a lot of conversations online, and I've just realized that, like, especially with an ideology like Mike has, where he's owning it, but he's not like all in on it. He's not like Bitcoin's the best. He's just like, I have a little bit of FOMO. I don't want to miss out. Like, if you're holding it in self custody, there's so many mistakes that you can make to lose that if you don't know what you're doing. So for your average person like Mike, holding it on an exchange makes a whole ton of sense, because especially the exchanges that we have here in New York with the bit license, the odds of those exchanges going belly up are almost zero. I mean, they're never zero, but it's so small. The odds are actually higher of you doing self-custody and losing it on your own than it would be having it on the exchange that you have. And I think you shared it. I don't want to dox it if you did, but like where you hold it, you feel pretty secure that, you go on, you log on to the app and you see your balance and you see what you got and you know what you got in USD terms.
Yep. Yeah, I'm currently on Gemini.
Yeah.
So I just click a button and there it is. One of my biggest fears is what happens if something goes, you forget your password, or you get a new phone and then you get locked out of there, and then what happens with all your money?
Well, that's the good thing about having it on a centralized exchange, because there are a lot of things you can do with that centralized exchange that you can prove who you are, because you do KYC, which is called know your own customer, and AML, anti-money laundering laws. When you sign up with Coinbase, you're agreeing to those types of things, which is supposed to both be a protection for them, protection for consumers, and a protection for you. So if you got a new phone, if you lost your password, you could literally give them information about you that only you would know, that would allow you to get access back to your account. With self-custody Bitcoin, none of that is relevant. If you lose the 12-seed password or 24-seed password of passphrase that you have to those coins, you can't call Bitcoin support. You can't call Satoshi and say, hey, can I have my coins back? It doesn't exist. So it's a huge responsibility. Now, for me, being in this, like, I want self-sovereignty. I wanna own my own value. I don't want to have to go through a third party. I don't want M&T Bank or Bank of America or Gemini or any of these other third parties to be a block for me, especially if God forbid something happens. Like in the times that we live in, whether you believe it or not, we have like a lot of like political fallouts where people, because they believe one thing or another, have had, access to certain things taken away, and some believe banking options taken away. I mean, we can just use COVID as an example, where the truckers, they were getting funds, whether you believe that they should have or they shouldn't have, they were getting GoFundMe monies, and GoFundMe, because it's bank, it's third party, the banks came in and said, cut that off. Truckers will not get that money. And then Bitcoiners came in, set up a self-custody Bitcoin wallet, and gave the keys to the truckers, and were sending money to Bitcoin, and there wasn't a damn thing banks could do about it. That's the aspect of Bitcoin that I like, because it eliminates the third parties. Now, for your average everyday person that's walking around in society, they may not like to admit it, but they like the fact that they can go on their banking app and know that their money's in the bank. They like the fact they can go on Gemini and know their Bitcoin's in Gemini. They like the third party aspect. It makes them feel safe. And I get it and I understand it. But for the OGs like me that came into this space, and obviously I've been transparent. When I first came in, I wanted to get rich. That was the whole reason of being here. But as I've evolved and been in this space forever and really knew what I had, I'm like, this is something that is like nothing else in finance. It gives me an ability to own something that can't be taken away from me. They can't take it away because I stopped paying taxes. They can't take it away from me because they don't like my political views. They can't take it away from me because they don't like the stuff that I say on social media. None of that can happen. Once I put it in my self-custody, where I have it now, I'm the only person on the planet outside of my son, because my son understands how to do all this stuff, that would be able to get access to it. And that's only because if I pass away, I want to be able to go on to my kids. So I can literally pass that on to my kids without probate, without going through the getting an attorney and settling an estate. None of that happens. I die, my son jumps onto where I have it, punches in 12 seats, and it automatically goes into his wallet. Passed on, super easy. My wealth, which is a majority of my wealth, goes transferred right to where I want it to be, without worrying about some asshole executor of an estate coming in and saying, no, we're not going to do that. Or maybe, if I get divorced, the ex-wife comes in, and all these things that are threats are eliminated with, and I'm passionate about it because I really believe that that's why people should own this asset. But again, like I told Troy, I've evolved, because when we first started this podcast, I'm like, everybody should own Bitcoin self-custody. This is so great. I want to tell everybody, I want everybody to do it. But I had to humble myself and recognize that I'm like the 1% of the population that wants that stuff. Most people want what you want. They just want to open up their app and know the money's there, right? When you go to the bank and you deposit your money in the bank, you want to know that the money. And I understand and respect that. So for people like you, which is most of the population, they should have it on an exchange. It should be in a third party because God forbid you change your phone. God forbid you lose your password. You shouldn't have to lose your Bitcoin because you didn't want to take that responsibility. I want the responsibility. So if something happens, I should be punished by not respecting that responsibility. You don't want that responsibility, so you shouldn't be punished for not wanting that responsibility and losing access to your coins. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
To me, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really, really good point. Yeah, I like the responsibility as well, So.
Yeah, I know you do. You do the same thing. You have even your crypto coins in self custody, so you do most of everything you have personally is like me.
Yeah.
Right.
But although I need a plan for if something did happen to me, someone could figure out how to get into it,
Yeah, I would suggest, like for me, I had for my son Cash. Ironically, his name is Cash. I set him up with the same self custody that I have, and he has like $100 of Bitcoin of his own in there. But I have him protecting his 12 seed passphrase, and then I have him knowing where mine is if something happens to me, where he can get access to it. So then if I pass away, he can go get my 12 seed word. I don't just have it with him. He doesn't have possession of it now. But there's another person. It's like multi-sig almost. I have another person that will give him access to where those 12 seed words are, and then he gets those 12 seed words, punches it in his device, and then he instantly has all my value, which I think is phenomenal. Like it's just a phenomenal technology if you take the time to understand it.
Yeah.
And Mike said 95%, maybe more of the population doesn't even know that exists, that you can do that. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't really matter until you go through somebody passing away and you have an executor of an estate, or if you're a trucker like in 2020 that's, protesting and needs to, get funds and all of your access to funds have been cut off from you. Or if you're somebody that's been falsely accused of a crime, which happens all the time, right? You could be literally accused of a crime, not convicted, accused of a crime, and law enforcement can literally freeze your accounts without you being convicted. You can just be charged. You can be charged. And like people that are, especially in finance, like if you're in finance, and I know this from working in TradFi, like there's a lot of things that could happen that could get you caught up in like litigation, and they can come in and freeze all your assets with you never being convicted. They can just say you did something. And then now while they're trying to figure shit out, all your stuff is frozen. You can't pay the bills. You can't buy groceries. You can't pay your mortgage. And then 6-7 months later, a year later, oh, I'm sorry, we were wrong. But all the damage has been done. But if you have access to something like Bitcoin, or to be fair, like you said, crypto, and you can live off that because you can liquidate it peer-to-peer, right? Because it's still peer-to-peer. I can find another Bitcoiner and I can send him, 0.1 Bitcoin, and he can send me, 11,000, 15,000, wherever the price is at that point, and I can have cash to take care of those things in the meantime. You can't put a price tag on that.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something, Troy?
No, I wasn't sure if you wanted to dive into the next topics.
Yeah, if you want to, Rich, you want to share the screen right here? I can kind of show this. 2020 to now, trending Bitcoin. Bitcoin is ready to go parabolic. You're a chart guy. You can kind of see like that trend line right there where I got my arrow at, and where that trend line is there, and how we're in that channel. And that channel was right there in 2020. And we're here right now, and it went parabolic in 21. And this is about where we're at in the cycle, because this is all, like, that's 2020 here. And then that was 21. So this is basically 24 here. And here's 21. And then here's the end stages. All this represents, this right here just represents a couple of months.
Well,
which would be the couple of months that we're at right here going into October.
Well, they say like 90% of the gains happen in the last 10% of the cycle. So we could see like either a blow off top, which ideally we don't want. But I mean, I personally think this is going to be going into early early 2026. I know a lot of people are speculating October top. I know, Don, you said you want to start selling your altcoins around then. I'm not really following a specific timeline. I'm more just following a system. But I mean, yeah, I mean that does look good. I'm not really into TA anymore, honestly. But
Yeah.
I know the law, like every cycle, the law of diminishing returns. So, I mean, I don't think we go to 250 this cycle, but do you think we have, because I know Bitcoin dominance is obviously down. My Bitcoin in the medium term trend is short. Do you think we still got a little bit more room to go here, or?
I actually want to pose this to Mike because I think it's more we kind of been through multiple cycles, so we kind of know what we're gonna do because we've been through it. I want to ask Mike this question. So typically, and I think we talked last. We did say something because I feel like you said when things dropped in 2020, you're like it's over, and I'm like it's not over, and I told you, and then it ended up coming back. So I remember us having a similar conversation. But let's say that this cycle plays out like 2017 and plays out like 2021, where we had this like where Bitcoin could go from 115,000 to 200 in like a month, because in 2021 it went from like 30 to 60, and then in 2017 it went from like 1,000 to 20,000 in like a month. So let's say that happened, Bitcoin goes running, and then some of the other little coins that you have, if that happens, Bitcoin's going to do a 2x. Some of those coins might do 5, 10. It might get crazy. You might look at your account. I don't know what the value of it is right now, but you might wake up one day and it might be 5 times more than what it is right today. It's possible. Yeah. What would you do as a retail person? I know you said, you want to miss out. How would you react just today, sitting here now thinking, if you woke up in October, because that's what we're kind of thinking October-ish. I think me and you talked offline. October 20th would be around where we would think that the cycle would potentially be topping. So you wake up in October, in the middle of October, and your Gemini account is 5 times bigger than it is right now. What would you think, and how would you react?
Oh, I don't think anything would change. I look at it like sometimes I look at my 401k,
okay,
and it like jumps up like $10,000. It's from the last time I was on. I'm just like, oh, wow, nice.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do anything though.
So you wouldn't get caught up in that FOMO and sell.
It depends where I'm at in my life, I guess.
Fair. That's a fair response.
If I needed the money for some reason, then maybe I would sell a little bit. Otherwise, I'd just let it ride.
See, I think, he was on this podcast a month ago and he got semi-orange pilled, I think. I think he gets it. I don't think Mike represents the overwhelming retail, because I think most of retail, if they wake up 5x, that's the top because they sell. Right, Troy? Like, that's what happens. Retail comes in, they're buying now, or they're buying a little bit after this, and then they wake up to a 5x, and they liquidate that 5x, and then you just have a cascade wall of liquidations, and that's what ends up starting the bear market. Right?
I mean, yeah, I plan on definitely selling 80, 90% of my portfolio, but that's just me. You know what I mean? I know kind of how the cycles work. I know about the bear markets. Like, I'm waiting for good valuation. Like, I'm excited for the bear market, honestly. Like,
but as really a crypto guy, yeah. You just said like 2 minutes ago, what if it does? What if we get something that isn't necessarily parabolic, but we get a run that coincides with when the parabolic top usually happens? But we keep going and it does extend into 26, which would mean that the 4-year cycle is broken. Because it's fair to say, right, and I think you'll agree with me here, we're not going to know the 4-year cycle broke until it already happened. So you won't be able to react in real time. You're going to have to wait to get confirmation, which means you miss it. That's the thing about trading. And that's the thing about like trying to like time shit. That's why time in the market always beats timing the market. And having a good strategy is always best. We're not going to get confirmation, and it's huge. I think this cycle more than any cycle, because I've been around, this is my 4th one. And after the first cycle, I was just a baby and I didn't know what the hell was happening. But in the 2017, 2018 cycle, I remember people saying that this is the one that's going to go forever. And then 2020, 2021, people were like, oh, the cycles are going to be broken. We're going to go on forever. So like that's always been a theme. And now you have a real, as this is played out institutionally, you have a real possibility that this 4-year cycle does break, right? But you have a lot of people that are going to play the 4-year cycle and are going to be looking for a top to exit because they're going to think there's going to be a bear market on the other side. But we're not going to know and get confirmation that it broke until it actually does break. So what will that mean for markets if that plays out that way?
I think that the 4-year cycle has less significance every 4 years, which I had the data to back that up. I don't have
Diminishing
time
returns,
to,
right?
yeah.
Law of
And there's
diminishing returns.
other data, but yeah, I'm playing systematically personally, so I don't really have a plan. There is no plan. My plan is just to follow the system like my religion. And when because I think this is going to extend into 2026. There is pain in selling early. So, I mean, if something does,
More pain in
let's
selling
say
early or more pain in selling late?
there's more pain in selling late, you know what I mean? So obviously scale out on the way up, going to stables or whatever. But I mean, I guess it all comes down to everyone's own lifestyle. Like he said, like everyone has different goals in life, and my goal is different than your goal and his goal. So, I mean, I honestly think the 4-year cycle is broken. Not completely broken, but it's kind of fallen the liquidity cycle. And I think that we're going to have corrections and bear markets, but they won't be as steep as what we've have seen in the past, especially with all the institutional capital that's here. So
I've been saying most of the time that I thought 75-25 that the 4-year cycle was going to break. I'm more probably down to 60-40 now, maybe even 55-45, only because of what happened with Ethereum and what Tom Lee did. I think that this may be the catalyst for things to really start moving, especially like you would know better than I did. I think ETH touched the all-time high or maybe even got slightly past it. So, but it hasn't gone price discovery yet, which is really weird. Usually you get like, especially when Bitcoin first went over the old all-time high of 60. When we breached 69, we went up to like 75 or 74 before we went back down. Like ETH literally like got a hair over the old all-time high and then receded. It didn't get into price discovery at all. It didn't really go much above it.
All-time high in 2021 is 48.67, and then the all-time high
slightly
today
above
was
it yesterday.
48.83.
Or not yesterday,
48.83
but
today.
when it hit the all-time high.
Or was it yesterday? Yeah. So we were about $20 over the all-time high. So we didn't really we're not really in price discovery. But if you look at the total too, which is the cryptocurrency market excluding Bitcoin and ETH, like that's about to take off. But I think once Ethereum is well into that price discovery zone, then I think things will start to get frothy.
Mike, we got about 10 minutes ish left on the podcast. Content creation. Let's talk about that. Like we're celebrating our 100th episode of doing content.
Yep, and congratulations.
No, thank you. Have you ever thought about creating your own content? Have you ever had an idea? I know we've talked online. That's kind of why I'm bringing it up. Of creating something on your own and doing something that you have a passion for that maybe you would start.
I think the stuff I have passion for, there's already enough content out there. Like fantasy football, WWE, the Buffalo Bills. I just enjoy listening to other people's content. I don't think I have anything to add. That's my personal opinion.
Fair enough.
There's one thing I think I might know about more than the average person, and that's like meeting celebrities. That's
true.
That's something I would.
Very true.
Just talking about like all the celebrities,
the experiences and all the pictures that you have of all the celebrities that you've
how
met.
I go to airports and hotels and Comic Cons, and I think that's something interesting.
Maybe instead of doing like a sit down podcast, you do some sort of like videoing of all that and then post that content and have somebody edit that and do that. Might be a lane for you, something that you could do.
That's
because you do that often. Like you're always meeting some new celebrity.
You have a system for it.
He does.
So So
He
you
does.
for the air because you mentioned going to the airport.
I don't know if he wants to share.
I know
it,
you
but
don't. I'm not saying you should share anything proprietary, but
You just know like when bands are in town or when WWE comes to town. You just get to know like when you're supposed to go to the airport. And
Interesting.
You just get to know after a while their schedules and everything, and they stay at the same hotels and it's
you think they would switch things up?
well, my sons and I, when I retired, we went on vacation and we went to Iceland. So we're in Reykjavik and we're having coffee, and we were planning to go to this gym where the Mountain works out. He's the guy that was on Game of Thrones, this big guy, And around that time, there was talk that Tyson Fury wanted to fight him. So we're just drinking our coffee, having a sandwich or whatever it was. And my son's Twitter, he sees a picture from Tyson that he's at the airport in Reykjavik. And we had just come from the Reykjavik airport a couple of days before. And my son's like, I know where he's going. He's going to the gym. He's going to the Mountains gym. So we literally like threw our sandwiches out, jumped in the car because we saw something on Twitter and like hightailed it over to the gym, which we were going to anyway because we wanted to see the gym. And sure enough, there he was there with his camera crew. So I got a couple pictures with the dude. But that's the only time I've ever really met a celebrity, and it was just because my son was following Twitter and he happened to catch it. So that's just kind of a
it's
funny
funny
thing.
you say
Hey.
about the gym because that's how the whole celebrity thing started with me. WWE was in town it was in 2013, and somebody I know just happened to say, I know they always go to this certain gym every time they're in town. So I just went there, and ironically, I went there, and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson happened to be back in WWE at the time for a short time, and he was at the gym, and this is like the first time I ever met anybody famous. I was just so starstruck. I went up and shook his hand, and I was like, I don't even need a picture with you. I'm just happy to meet you. And now I look back and I'm like, I could have had a picture with the most famous man in the world, and I passed on it because I was so starstruck. But that's how it all began for me. It all started at a gym in Buffalo.
Wow.
Rich,
Well, I podcast with the celebrities, so.
Can you share my screen real quick? I want to kind of talk about this on the way out the door. So this is a good graphic that it's always good to come back to because I kind of said it already earlier. Time in the market more than timing the market. If you look back to 2015, and this is with gold at an all-time high now. Gold was much cheaper in 2015 than it is today. And in 2015, it took 116 Bitcoin to equal 1,000 grams of pure gold. In 2025, that same 1,000 grams of pure gold is 0.9 Bitcoin with gold at an all-time high. So when we say everything is trending towards zero against Bitcoin, it doesn't mean that the prices are going down. In nominal terms, we just talked about this on Thursday on the podcast. In nominal terms, things are going up. We all know that. That's the problem. That's what inflation does. Inflation makes something go from $2 to $4, from $4 to $6. That's what inflation does. That's nominal terms. But in Bitcoin terms, it costs less and less Bitcoin to buy those same products that are going up in value in USD terms over the long term. So especially when you look at cycles and you go back to the first cycle in 2013, the second cycle in 2017, then the 2021 cycle, and now today, every single cycle, things go down in Bitcoin terms while going up in nominal terms. And that's the power of Bitcoin. And that's why, we started this podcast, was to try to get the word out, to do the little that we could with the voices that we have, to try to get people to understand more and more, and maybe not as effectively as we'd like, because it's a complex topic and it's hard for people to completely grasp and understand. But I truly believe that this will eventually happen, and we're librarying content where I think I looked earlier, we have 460 or 470 videos in our library where someone can go back and look and see that we started talking about this in 2022. And this went on for as long as it did. And we were a part, even a small little part, of helping to get this onboarded to the masses, where maybe sometime 10, 15, 20 years in the future, when we're on more of a Bitcoin standard, that people can look back and say, who are the people that were talking about this when nobody else was talking about it? And they can go back and look and see that the Defion Productions podcast was one of those early voices that had it, that understood it, and was trying to help people get onboarded to this new ideology of finance and money. Before we get out, Troy, do you got any final thoughts before we close this thing down?
No, I think you said it well.
Mike, as our guest, anything you want to say before we shut this thing down?
Just keep up the good work. Congratulations on 100 episodes and hopefully 100 more, and keep it rocking.
Yeah, I want to add thank you, Rich, for everything you've done for us, and this has been an awesome experience. So
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment.
no, Troy, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, you guys gave me a shot, and I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from everything that I've done, but this is the one I probably learned the most, which I think is actually benefiting me long term. I mean, I learned about other things, but this one is the one that I've actually, started to make changes with some of my financial things on a small level because I'm an old guy and I'm very cautious how I do things. But, I've made a few changes and I want to kind of see how the next 6 months go. And then I may make some more changes. And, and I do, and you said something about if it went up tenfold or whatever it did, let's say it shoots up, what do you do? You're so tempted to, I'll just turn it into fiat. And it's when that's the thing that I think people will all struggle with. When do I take it? And I think you said it best, Mike, is you take it when you take what you need when you need it, because at the end of the day, you have to live.
Yep.
And the money's great, but you can't take it with you. You can leave it for your family, but you can't take it with you, at least not yet. And so, I mean, there's definitely that aspect. And so, but your brain wants to do that. Your brain's like, I should cash it out and whatever. So now I think I've learned valuable lessons listening to both of you guys over, since last October, to whatever it is now. We're coming up on 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And
up on 2 years.
no, I've learned a lot from you guys. Well, so I appreciate the business, but I also appreciate what I've learned from you guys.
I'll end it with the reason why we're doing this, which is the Niagara Gospel Rescue Mission. In the corner, you see it's on the other side over there. The QR code, even if it's $1, I donated earlier on behalf of the Defion Productions podcast to the Gospel Rescue Mission. If you can, anything you can will help. Please donate. And if you're watching this podcast, when you do that, put in the memo, put Defion Labs or put Bitcoin or something silly like that, so they know that it came from our aspect or our little sector of this thing. And I'll reiterate what Troy said. Thanks, Rich, for giving us a place to come and film and make quality content. Hopefully we have 100 more episodes that we continue to film with this podcast. And as we always do, 99 times before today, for the 100th time, definitely not the last. Don't trust, verify. Thanks, guys.